I've always aimed to do what's right, following the simple idea: treat others the way you want to be treated. These are the principles I try to live by, and I've made an effort to stick to them. Yet even though I never meant to hurt anyone, spoke harshly, or avoided responsibility for my mistakes, leading a good life turns out to be surprisingly tough. In summary, I consistently choose the morally upright path when faced with challenges. I present facts in a friendly manner when addressing others' errors and acknowledge my own faults. Despite my dedication to these values, a major life event took me by surprise. I was just going about my life, unaware of any warning signs, when it happened. Update. Returning from a 2-day conference in Texas, I was met with a surprise from my wife. In the kitchen, Casey and our kids were laughing. When I inquired about the source of their amusement, the atmosphere shifted. Casey didn't ask. She told me to sit down. She suggested that I take a seat, and she waved some papers in my face. There were adoption papers among them, and she explained that she wanted Jeff to adopt the kids. Assertively, she stated that she wasn't asking for anything except the house. According to Casey, I should sign the papers because she believed I wanted the best for the children, and then we could move on. She said all this in a cool and composed manner. My wife of 12 years had just handed me divorce papers and adoption forms for our 3 kids. My son, Devin, gave me a little smirk. Devin was 10. Joy, my daughter, didn't even bother looking at me. She was 9 and busy with her iPod, not bothered about losing her father. Patrick, my 7-year-old, was the only one speaking up. Patrick explained that Jeff had a big house and that they liked him, as if that would make everything okay. I just sat there, looking at Casey and the kids like they were crazy. I wondered if she was high or drunk, but there was no drink smell. So, why this sudden divorce? Casey dropped the papers on the counter and gave me a check for half our bank accounts, demanding the kids to take my bags to my truck. Unbelievable. They had packed my bags before I got home and waited for the right moment to spring it on me. I asked Casey with a slightly menacing tone if she thought I was going somewhere. She replied that I was moving out and asked if I hadn't been listening. I retorted, saying that this is my family's house. My parents said I could live here long before we got married. I didn't recall her name being on anything tied to this house. I didn't know why she wanted a divorce, but she wasn't taking my parents' house. I shouted that she could leave, but I was staying in this house. Casey rolled her eyes, and realizing she couldn't win, changed her orders and yelled at the kids to pack their bags. They had to change their plans and go to Jeff's house. I finally asked who in the heck Jeff was, and Casey responded that he's the man who's been with her while I'm at work. She wasn't guilty or remorseful. Casey showed nothing but disrespect and contempt for me. I looked at my kids for support, and my daughter told her brothers to hurry up, stating that Jeff can give them a better life. She added that Mom loves him, and so do we. My sons nodded in agreement. I stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. They all headed toward Casey's car. I told Casey not to touch that car, explaining that I pay for it, and it's in my name. I instructed my son Duck to call his sorry pals and tell them to pick all of them up. Casey and the kids looked back at me, and all of them, the kids as well as Casey, flipped me the bird. I was beyond angry. I had worked for this family, and they ditched me for some money. I did what any normal man would do. I got really drunk. For the first time in my life, I hated somebody. I hated this Jeff guy with a passion. But more than him, I hated my family. I realized that it wasn't all him. My so-called family had chosen to betray me. Once I had sobered up the next morning, I cleaned myself up and went online to find a lawyer. I made an appointment for the next day at noon. They love him so much. I decided to give them what they asked for. My attorney looked over the agreement and told me to sign it before Casey changed her mind. I signed it, and my lawyer sent it back. Casey didn't even ask for child support. In the blink of an eye, with the stroke of a pen, I no longer had a wife or kids. My family tossed me aside like old bread. So much for staying together until the kids leave or growing old together. Update: 6 months later, the divorce was finalized. Like everything else, I changed over time. I threw myself into work, returned to college, and earned my master's and PhD. Now, I was Dr. Billy, PhD CPA. Many find accounting dull, but it somehow matched my life. I chose to start my own office, a boutique operation catering to high net worth clients with personalized attention. Through word of mouth, my client base grew, and by the end of my second year, I was saving a significant amount. I met Patty, a wonderful woman who shared my values and interests. A bit taller than Casey, with curves in the right places. By the end of the fourth year, my firm needed more space, so I bought a 5-story office building instead of renting. Patty and I loved it so much that we got married on the 4th floor, a small but festive event. Perhaps I enjoyed myself too much, because a few months later, Patty revealed she was pregnant. I wished for more alone time with my wife, as my life had been improving over the last 6 years. However, I was shocked when Casey served me with child support papers, asking for $3,000 a month and $432,000 in back child support. It seemed absurd, since I hadn't heard from them in 7 years. I laughed and handed the papers to my attorney. After a good laugh, my attorney called Casey's attorney, discovering Casey was broke and alone. She had learned about my success, remarriage, and growing family. Casey's husband, Jeff, disappeared, and a week later she was served with divorce papers. Jeff refused to pay child support, claiming coercion by Casey to sign adoption forms. The judge declared the adoptions void. With their divorce finalized and money gone, I became Casey's next option. Casey involved my parents, who had stayed in touch with her since she left me. They sided with her without telling me about their contact. Casey played the actress, and my parents believed her story. My dad was the first to talk to me, urging forgiveness and family reunification. I reminded him of my remarriage, and my father suggested fixing my marriage to Casey, leaving Patty and taking care of the kids. I lost respect for him, asked him to leave, and my mom made a similar request. They insisted that if I didn't take Casey back, I could move out, and they would give her the house. Despite an eviction notice, I didn't mind as the sale on my new house was closing the next day. Remarkably, when paying cash, people go the extra mile to get things done. Update. The next week, my parents came to the house and found it empty. Casey and her kids moved in the following day. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't talked to my parents, Casey, or her kids. Patty and I now have 4 kids, and our business is thriving. This year, I received the Businessman of the Year award for our area. A wonderful photo of me and my family appeared in the local paper. Proudly, I accepted the award and credited Patty for most of it. I told the audience that without my wife Patty, there would be no award for me. She is my rock. While delivering my speech, my parents walked in with Casey. Casey approached the stage and called me a neglectful father. She told everyone that I abandoned my kids and her, blaming Patty for ruining our marriage. I believe my attorney anticipated this. He seemed to have a sense that Casey would use this event to attack me and promote her false story. He used a remote to control a projector at the side of the hall. Private investigators are quite resourceful in uncovering hidden details and using advanced technology. It was astonishing. A film started playing on the blank wall, showing Casey and her attorney discussing revoking the adoption papers I had signed in the parking lot outside his office. She informed her lawyer that the court voiding them would be more beneficial than what she had given him that afternoon. They also discussed a plan to medicate Patty and film her cheating on me. Then Casey would come in and mend my broken heart. She also revealed how she manipulated my parents to be her puppets, threatening that they wouldn't see their grandkids if they didn't comply. When the short video ended, Casey's attorney, Finchett, tried to leave quietly through a side door, but was stopped by the chief of police. Some judges in the audience took an interest in the tape. I glanced at my parents, then walked over to my wife and kids, helped them with their coats, and left. Outside, I kissed Patty, and we headed for the car. Just as I finished putting the kids in the car, my parents called my name. I got in my car without looking back and drove away. I didn't see them again until I was called to court to testify against Casey and her lawyer. After giving my testimony, I left the courtroom. My father was waiting outside. My father expressed how sorry he and my mother were and asked me to give them a chance to make things up. He mentioned the 3 kids who missed me and the 4 grandkids they had never met. My father urged me to find it in my heart to forgive them and put the family back together. I just looked and turned away. After a moment, I stopped and told him I would think about it. Update: Casey received a 3-month jail sentence and 4 years of probation. Her lawyer was disbarred for conspiring to commit fraud against the court and me. The Child Welfare Department warned that the kids would go to foster care unless my parents or I took them. I asked my parents to take them. My dad said I'd have to forgive them someday. My dad questioned if wanting to be part of the grandkids' lives was so terrible, emphasizing that they were old and would miss most of their lives. He asked if I was heartless, unable to see that she made a mistake. I explained that there's nothing wrong with wanting to be in their lives, but Casey wasn't just mistaken. She was cold-hearted and got what she deserved. The kids chose him. I reminded him of his past words, saying that some things can't be forgiven, and he also mentioned the road to hell being paved with good intentions. I pointed out that he turned his back on me when Casey lied, cheated, turned the kids against me, and he still sided with her. Now, he wanted me to act like nothing had changed. I told him that he's old enough to know he made the wrong choice, and now he has to live with the consequences. That was a decade ago. Casey didn't learn her lesson. She married again, attempted the same deceit as she did with me, but it didn't end well. Her husband caught her with her lover and kicked them both. My kids with Casey are grown, and Devin and Patrick are in prison. Joy, before anything went wrong, came to our house, seeking to be part of our family. Patty believed Joy had been misled by her mother and insisted we take her in to help her live a moral and productive life. My parents met my kids before they passed away, leaving everything to my judgment. They asked me to distribute their assets fairly among their 7 grandchildren in my will. Patty and I will soon be empty nesters, and I'll cherish having my wife back all to myself. For some, Billy is seen as weak for not fighting to keep his family or for walking away. Some things just aren't worth the fight. My name is Rick, and during high school and college, people often thought of me as a computer geek. While I'm not the best-looking guy, I stand at 6 feet tall, weigh around 170 pounds, and have light brown hair. I've always been into computers, programs, and games, and anyone with computer troubles usually came to me for help. That's how I met Karen, who eventually became my wife. 7 years ago, we were both students at the University of Wisconsin. Karen studied ABA legal studies while I focused on computer science. She aspired to be a corporate lawyer, and I aimed to delve deeper into computers and programs. When Karen struggled with her computer system, a professor from the computer science department referred her to me. I helped her grasp the system, and we not only became efficient collaborators, but also good friends, spending a lot of time together. Now, let me introduce Karen. She's an attractive 5 feet 4 inches tall, blonde with a stunning 36-24-36 figure. She's not just good looking, she also has a fantastic personality and easily connects with everyone. I genuinely liked her, and over time, I fell deeply in love with her. Karen, in turn, got to know me and fell in love with me too. It might sound surprising, but stranger things have happened, although I can't think of any right now. Update. After 2 years in school, Karen realized she wouldn't achieve her goal of becoming an attorney. However, she remained interested in legal work and applied for jobs as a legal secretary. She landed a position with a major brokerage firm and quickly adapted to the job. We got married within 2 months, and she continued working to support us while I finished school. Over the last 5 years, her hard work, dedication, and friendliness helped her climb the corporate ladder, and she was eventually transferred to the Chicago headquarters to be the assistant to the manager of the firm's legal department. I earned a degree in computer science and decided to make a good living by writing computer game programs. Starting my own business, I've created numerous popular games that you or your kids would recognize. I've made a substantial amount of money and no longer need to work as hard. We moved to Highland Park, a suburb of Chicago, along Lake Michigan. Since we were both successful in our work, Karen and I have built a comfortable life together, working because we enjoy it, not out of necessity. To avoid getting bored, I secretly started another company in Milwaukee, about an hour's commute, investigating computer software fraud, CSFI Inc. Through confidential contacts at the Institute of Computer Technology, I began with a small client list that has continued to grow through word-of-mouth advertising. CSFI Inc. now has about 150 clients and might be working on 5 or 6 projects at any given time, generating profits exceeding $3 million last year. I hired a competent office manager, Carrie, and contracted computer experts like myself for investigation work. We rotate them on projects so they don't become too familiar to the customer. The only actual employees of the company are Carrie and me, and the investigators. Each gets paid a percentage of the fee for the projects they do for me. Due to the huge profits in the software industry, the need for confidentiality and secrecy is extreme, so I've always maintained anonymity. In fact, no one at the company knows me, not even Carrie, because I always wear a disguise to hide my true identity when I investigate. I even wore a disguise when I hired Carrie to keep my involvement a secret. Over the years, I've become adept at developing new disguises to fool everyone. When I investigate a case, I get paid like the rest of the investigation staff, except my pay goes to a separate account I've set up under an alias. The majority of the investigations are done by my contracted staff, but about once a quarter, I take on a job myself for fun. Karen is unaware of CSFI Inc., so I use the pretext of going to Milwaukee to meet with my game distributor to get away for a few days to do the investigation. Actually, all of my computer game business is done through the internet for CSFI Inc., though. I drive to the company's apartment in Milwaukee, park my car in the garage, put on my disguises, and then drive a company car, currently a Buick, to the office to pick up the investigation materials. I go wherever I need to do the job, sometimes local, but sometimes in NY or C. I finish the job, go back to Milwaukee, reverse the process, and go home. You might be thinking that while I'm traveling, I'm cheating, taking every opportunity to date women and cheat on my wife. But nothing could be further from the truth. I love my wife beyond my own understanding and would never do anything to hurt her or my marriage. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Karen, and that's why I'm writing this story. I personally took on an investigation for Marcos' software to determine if one of their programmers was selling source code to a competitor. Jeff Marcos designed a program to track securities transactions, and I thought it would give me insight into Karen's work, so I jumped on that investigation myself. The company is in Oak Brook, another suburb of Chicago. I thought it might be fun to explore restaurants and clubs in my hometown while in disguise. Who knew? Maybe I would encounter some friends I could toy with. Little did I know what I would be really encountering and what I would be investigating. I had all the information needed from Carrie, my office manager, and I set myself up in the Drake Hotel in Oak Brook, a short drive from Marcos Software. I arrived at Marcos, and after a short wait, was greeted by Jeff Marcos. He was tall, dark, and handsome, a replica of the traditional pattern for a man that women would find attractive. Jeff was also very outgoing and friendly, and had a presence about him that put me at ease, and I really found myself liking the man. He invited me into his office and talked to me about what he suspected and how he thought I might approach the investigation. He set me up with everything I needed right there in his office and told all his people that I was a special projects manager with one of their customers there to work out the bugs on the program application with my company. I thought it would work out quite well, so we went with that approach. Update. On the second day of my stay, I confirmed Jeff's suspicions. One of his team members, a programmer named Tom, was indeed selling source code, and I found out exactly how he was doing it. While I was working on my report, Jeff's cell phone rang, which was placed on his desk next to me. Jeff wasn't in the room, so I glanced at the caller ID and was shocked to see Karen and my wife's cell phone number. Initially, I thought about grabbing the phone to surprise her, thinking her company might be using Jeff's software and imagining her shock upon discovering I was working there. However, I realized it would jeopardize keeping CSFI Inc. and my identity a secret. Instead, I chuckled to myself about the irony of the situation. Jeff returned and called my wife back. My amusement turned into heartbreak and sickness when I overheard him say, "Karen, I'm glad you called. I had a wonderful time last night. Can we meet at Morton's for dinner at 6:30 p.m.? Okay, I'll see you there. And afterward, we'll go to your place for dessert. Bye, beauty." I was stunned, feeling like I could be knocked out of my chair with a feather. I must have looked like a zombie, and the shock made me feel nauseous. My heart pounded so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack. I excused myself, went to the men's room, and sat in the stall until my heart settled, trying to comprehend how Karen could do this. I thought she loved me as much as I loved her. Yet, she was meeting Jeff again, and he spoke of enjoying the previous night. The things he said to her hinted at a level of relationships beyond what you'd say unless you'd had closeness. I couldn't fathom it. I had no inkling that Karen had been cheating on me. Our closeness life was satisfying, and she never complained about unmet needs. I was utterly bewildered and couldn't comprehend what was happening. And throughout all of this, my heart was breaking. How could she betray me, someone she supposedly loved? Did she love me at all? Was my marriage genuine, or was it just a facade? I genuinely felt like my world was collapsing at that moment. Everything I had worked for was for Karen and me, and now I was uncertain. Once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I decided I needed to confirm my suspicions instead of relying on the limited evidence I had. Once I gathered all the facts, or as many as possible, I planned to take action. I returned to the office with Jeff and focused on finishing the project, knowing I would dedicate the next few days to uncovering the truth. Sitting there was challenging because I wanted to confront him, but I understood that it would be a mistake. To make matters worse, Jeff had a big grin on his face and apologized for his comments in front of me. He explained, "I'm sorry for what I said, but that woman is attractive. I met her a few weeks ago at a customer's office and we hit it off. At the moment, I despised him, but I could see why Karen might be interested because he was easy to talk to." He continued, "She told me that the next time her husband, she calls him Computer Boy, leaves town for business, she'll call me and we'll meet up." Although it hurt, I held it together. She said she married Computer Boy because she knew he'd become rich, providing her with a comfortable life, while she could still have affairs with attractive men like me. He laughed again. I questioned her love for him, and she claimed she loved him, but also enjoyed extramarital affairs. I couldn't believe the information I gathered from him without revealing my identity or intentions. It became clear it was indeed my Karen, especially with the Computer Boy reference. It seemed evident she had cheated on me with him and possibly others throughout our marriage. While I knew a lot, I needed more proof before executing a plan. I informed Jeff that I needed to leave for the rest of the day and would return the following morning. In my car, I called Karen on my cell phone. She acted sweet and loving, expressing how much she missed me, making me nauseous. Aware of the deception, I asked about her plans for the day, and she mentioned working and possibly having dinner with friends. I informed her it would be another day or two before I returned home and said I would call her later. She insisted I not call because she didn't know when she would be home from her evening out with friends. In reality, she just didn't want any interruptions while being with Jeff. I felt sick to my stomach. Update. I felt the need to catch her cheating, and I knew exactly how to do it. On my way home, I went to the electronics store and purchased 5 new mini wireless surveillance cameras and a modem. This would allow me to monitor various areas in the house: the kitchen, living room, family room, master bedroom, and guest bedroom. I wasn't sure where she would take him, but I wanted to cover any possible location. When I got home, I used the remote to turn off the security camera, parked my car in the garage to avoid suspicion, entered the house, and rewound the tape to erase any evidence of my arrival. I installed the surveillance cameras, connected them to the modem and recorder in my basement workshop, allowing me to access the output online and monitor the entire house discreetly. Satisfied with my setup, I left the house, got into my car, and left the driveway. I drove around the block and reactivated the security cameras with the remote as I passed by. Unless she scrutinized the security tape closely and noticed the time break, she wouldn't realize anything had happened at home. Besides, Karen never bothered checking the tapes. That was my responsibility. After completing all these tasks, I started feeling hungry and went to a nearby pizza place to eat. I had a couple of beers, wanting to stay sharp as I kept an eye on what was happening at home. Later, I went to the hotel, set up my computer, and waited. Despite my hopes that it was all a mistake and she wasn't cheating, my emotions overwhelmed me, and I broke down in tears. Around 8 p.m., I saw her car pull into the garage, and it was clear she was alone. My heart skipped a beat, thinking maybe nothing was going to happen. However, a couple of minutes later, the security camera was turned off, and I couldn't see the driveway anymore. Switching to the kitchen camera, I witnessed her entering, dressed in one of my favorite outfits, a short black dress, rather low-cut with spaghetti straps. I loved seeing her in that outfit until that very moment. I knew she wouldn't wear it to go out with friends for dinner. She wore it to entice someone, usually me. But tonight, it wasn't me. Tears streamed down my face again as I realized This wasn't a mistake. Karen was not who or what I thought she was. I didn't have to wait long for Jeff to enter the kitchen. Apparently, Karen left the garage door open, and he parked his car in my spot to avoid the neighbors seeing it. When he walked in, Karen embraced him, and they shared a kiss. While he rubbed her back, she suggested moving to the bedroom. They grabbed a bottle of wine and 2 glasses and left the kitchen. I switched to the living room camera and saw them pass on their way to the bedrooms. Strangely, I hoped she would choose the guest room over our bed, though I knew it was a ridiculous thought. However, that wasn't the case. When I switched to the guest room camera, nothing was there. Switching to our bedroom, they were sitting on the bed kissing. Karen opened the wine and poured each a glass, toasting to a handsome man in great closeness. They drank half the glass and set them down. Jeff stood up, and Karen opened his pants. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. I wasn't turned on, and I didn't want it to happen. If it seemed like the first time, I would have stopped it, but there were signs it wasn't. I needed proof before deciding what to do. Everything I feared happened. Karen praised their encounter and suggested doing it again tomorrow night. My heart broke when she expressed she might not let me have bad life with her again. Until that moment, I thought she loved me and just wanted more closeness. I hoped confronting her would make her stop out of love for me. But with that comment, I realized she didn't love or respect me. I knew our marriage was over because I couldn't live with someone who didn't love and respect me, no matter how much I loved her. My love died, and even though I never expected it, I had to mourn its loss. I turned everything off, got into bed, and cried until morning. I woke up, saw my swollen eyes and messy appearance in the mirror, and knew it was going to be a tough day. Despite the pain, I understood what I had to do. Update. I had been considering how to end our marriage and, frankly, how to hurt her like she hurt me. I know seeking revenge is immature, but I felt I needed to hurt her for my healing to start. I didn't harbor strong resentment towards Jeff, but it didn't seem right for him to be involved with another man's wife, break up their marriage, and not face consequences. I wanted my revenge, and maybe then I could move on. I went to Jeff's office to execute my plan. As computer boy, it was easy for me to make it happen without leaving any clues. I didn't even want to physically damage him anymore. I just wanted my revenge, and the cost would be high for both of them. During Jeff's staff meeting, I took his keys, had copies made, and accessed his house where he stored copies of his source code. Although I already had access to his computer system, I hacked into his security files, obtained passwords, and wrote a virus program to delete his source code from every drive on his network, including his home and customers' computers. Activating the program would change all passwords and destroy all copies of his program permanently. Then I hacked into my wife's work computer, used her password to transfer $200,000 from my business account to Jeff's, and then to an account I set up for him in the Grand Cayman Islands. I erased the money trail, anticipating that a skilled analyst could eventually trace it. I don't know if Jeff and Karen got back together on Wednesday night, but it didn't matter to me anymore. On Thursday morning, I triggered the virus program. By Friday at 9 a.m., I handed Jeff a report on the software code theft and informed him that CSFI would bill him for my services, knowing he wouldn't pay. I left his office with him expressing pleasure in knowing me, and I thought, if he only knew. But I smiled, shook his hand, and wished him luck. I went to his home, used the copied keys to find archived copies of his program, took them with me, and headed to Milwaukee. In my apartment, I burned them all, seeking revenge without personal profit. I stayed there on Thursday night, waiting for the fallout. Friday morning, I informed Carrie that I completed the project, and Marco's software could be built. She said she'd handle it, and my fee would be sent to my account. I drove home and found Karen crying. She told me she was sent home pending an investigation into securities fraud involving money from our business account. I acted shocked and asked for details. She mentioned money transferred to Jeff Marcos, someone she met a couple of weeks ago at the office but didn't know well. At 9 a.m., chaos erupted when everything went dead as everyone was working. None of the programmers could access the system. Jeff struggled to get in, and the phones were ringing non-stop because their customers couldn't use the tracking program. I didn't witness it, but I knew it was happening as I described. Later, I found out Jeff had fired Tom for stealing source code, and when everything went haywire, he blamed Tom again. Well, Tom wasn't innocent, so he can face the consequences. As a programmer, I believe anyone messing with source code should be penalized. The $200,000 was traced to Jeff's account, and he denied knowledge, accusing Karen. She, in turn, denied knowing anything, blaming Jeff. During the investigation, I stayed calm until Jeff revealed they had a close relationship. I confronted Karen, and she admitted it, apologizing and crying for forgiveness. She claimed it was a one-time thing due to loneliness during my extended absence. I knew it was a lie, but didn't bother challenging it. It didn't matter anymore. Jeff was found guilty of securities fraud, fined $50,000, and sentenced to 6 months in jail, serving only 3 for good behavior. However, upon release, he lost his program and company. Last I heard, he worked as a programmer for a competitor, and ironically, Tom worked there too. Karen lost her job, and unable to move past her infidelity, I served her with divorce papers, citing the infidelity clause. Being a computer geek, her settlement was only 10% of our net worth. She was fined $50,000 for securities fraud and received 3 years probation. Luckily, she avoided prison, but with only $150,000 left, she couldn't afford a decent house in Chicago. She moved to Milwaukee and became a waitress in a bar. While she might do well, she won't enjoy the life we had together. I hope she always remembers how much I loved her and feels the hurt when thinking of me. Update. I sold the Highland Park house and moved to an apartment in Milwaukee. I still had $1.8 million from our shared funds and an additional $1.2 million in the CSFI Inc. account. So, I thought it was time to enjoy my wealth. I sold the company for another $4 million and decided it was time for Carrie to know her real boss. She mentioned she knew it was me all along, regardless of any disguise I used. Gotta appreciate that woman. And I do, often and well, and she loves me in return. Neither of us works full-time now. We're just savoring the rewards of our hard work. We got married soon after my divorce was finalized, and we're expecting our first child this December.